This isn't about calories, discipline, or how hard you try. If weight loss feels impossible, there's a hidden reason behind it. A reason most people never hear explained clearly. It's known as the hidden cause of weight gain, and it affects how your body stores fat every day, even when you're eating less or exercising more. That's why effort alone stops working. The real issue starts with insulin resistance, not overeating. When insulin stops working properly, fat burning shuts down. Your body loses control over blood sugar control. Sugar stays high, energy crashes, and fat storage increases. At the same time, your fat-burning hormone gets blocked. So instead of burning fat, your body protects it. This happens silently, without you noticing. That's why so many people blame themselves unfairly. They think the problem is willpower or consistency, but the truth is biological, not behavioral. There's a specific insulin-related trick most people ignore, a mechanism that decides whether fat loss is possible or not. Once you see it, the struggle finally makes sense, and almost no one explains this correctly. If you've been trying to lose weight without real success, this is for you. You follow diets, cut calories, and push through workouts. At first, maybe something changes, then everything stalls again. The scale refuses to move, or the weight comes right back. You start questioning your effort and your discipline. It feels like your body is ignoring everything you do, and that frustration builds week after week, especially when others seem to lose weight so easily. You may notice constant hunger even after eating full meals. Cravings for sugar or carbs hit out of nowhere. Late at night or right after eating, the urge feels automatic. Your belly seems to hold fat no matter what you try. This stubborn abdominal fat is one of the biggest red flags. It's not about eating too much food. It's about how your body reacts to that food, and insulin plays a bigger role than most realize. Many people are told this is just aging or a slow metabolism. They hear that weight gain is normal after a certain age, so they push harder, restrict more, and feel worse. Energy drops, motivation fades, and results disappear. This creates a cycle of effort followed by disappointment. Over time, people start blaming themselves. But self-blame is based on the wrong explanation, because the real issue isn't visible on the surface. What's happening inside the body matters more than what you see. When insulin resistance builds, fat loss becomes harder by default. Your body becomes less responsive to the signals that burn fat, so it stores energy instead of releasing it. This happens even if your diet looks perfect, and even if you're doing everything you were told to do. The system itself is working against you, not because it's broken, but because it's overloaded. This is why traditional advice feels so exhausting. It asks you to fight your biology with willpower, but willpower always loses to hormonal signals, especially when insulin is constantly elevated. Your body thinks it needs to protect stored energy, so it increases hunger and slows fat burning. That response is automatic, not a personal failure, and it happens to millions of people silently. Here's the most important thing to understand right now. The problem isn't what you're doing wrong. The problem is what's happening inside your body. More specifically, how insulin is controlling fat storage. Once you see how this internal process works, everything changes, because the solution isn't more effort. It's fixing the signal that tells your body to store fat. And that mechanism is what we need to look at next. For a long time, I assumed the problem was genetic. I thought weight gain was just part of getting older. Everyone around me said metabolism naturally slows down, so I accepted that explanation without questioning it. It sounded logical and socially accepted. Doctors often repeat the same idea, and most people stop looking any deeper. That belief alone keeps millions stuck. But something didn't fully add up. My eating habits hadn't changed that much. My activity level was still relatively consistent, yet my energy felt completely different after meals. Instead of feeling fueled, I felt drained, sleepy, foggy, and hungry again very quickly. That reaction didn't match the slow metabolism story. It pointed to something more specific. I started noticing a clear pattern. Whenever I ate certain foods, my energy crashed. Cravings would show up fast and aggressively. Not emotional cravings, but physical ones, the kind that feel automatic and urgent. That's when glucose started to stand out, because those crashes always followed sugar spikes, and that pattern repeated over and over. Once I paid attention to blood sugar, everything shifted. Energy highs and lows weren't random anymore. They followed a predictable internal response. When glucose spiked, insulin surged, and shortly after, hunger and fatigue took over. That cycle explained the constant desire to eat. It also explained why fat loss felt blocked, because insulin was always elevated.
What surprised me most was how common this is. Almost everyone experiences these spikes daily, but few people connect them to weight gain. They blame calories, stress, or discipline instead. Yet the body responds to signals, not intentions, and insulin is one of the strongest signals there is. When it stays high, fat storage is prioritized. That's basic biology, not a personal flaw. The moment I understood this pattern, things finally aligned. Weight gain stopped feeling random or inevitable. It became a predictable response to internal chemistry. That realization alone removes a lot of frustration, because it reframes the entire problem. This isn't about trying harder, it's about correcting a specific biological loop. And once you see how that loop works, everything makes sense. Blood sugar spikes are far more powerful than most people realize. Every time you eat certain foods, glucose rises fast in your bloodstream. Your body reacts immediately to protect you from that spike. It releases insulin to push sugar out of the blood. This response is automatic and necessary for survival. But when spikes happen too often, problems begin. The system becomes overwhelmed instead of balanced, and that's where fat storage quietly takes over. Here's how the cycle really works inside your body. A spike in blood sugar triggers a strong insulin release. Insulin's job is to store excess energy quickly. It pushes sugar into cells and locks fat in place. While insulin is high, fat burning is turned off, not slowed down, completely blocked. Your body cannot burn fat and store it at the same time, so storage always wins in this state. When this happens repeatedly, the body adapts. It expects sugar to keep coming in, so it stays in storage mode longer than necessary. Even between meals, insulin remains elevated. This is when fat loss becomes extremely difficult. Calories don't matter as much in this phase. Your body is hormonally instructed to hold fat, and no amount of effort can override that signal. This is exactly where people start blaming themselves. They think they lack discipline or consistency, but the body isn't responding to motivation, it's responding to chemical signals. High insulin tells the body to conserve energy, so hunger increases and energy drops. That's not weakness, it's survival biology, and it happens without conscious control. The most frustrating part is how invisible this process is. You can eat healthy and still trigger blood sugar spikes. You can exercise and still remain stuck in storage mode, because the issue isn't behavior alone. It's the internal response to repeated glucose overload. That's why the same advice works for some people and not others. Different insulin responses create different outcomes, and most plans ignore this completely. What's critical to understand is this: insulin itself is not the enemy. Your body needs it to function and stay alive. The real problem is constant elevation and poor control. That's what keeps fat burning shut down. Once you separate insulin's role from the confusion around it, you can finally see where the real leverage is, because the next step is learning how this signal can be changed naturally. Your body has a specific fat-burning hormone designed to release stored fat. Its job is to signal cells to open up and use fat for energy. When this hormone is active, weight loss becomes possible. Energy feels more stable, and hunger becomes more predictable. This system evolved to help humans survive between meals. It works quietly in the background every day, but it only works under the right internal conditions, and that's where most people get stuck. High insulin directly interferes with this hormone's function. When insulin stays elevated, the fat-burning signal is muted. Think of insulin as a lock on the fat cell door. As long as the lock is engaged, fat cannot exit. It doesn't matter how much fat is stored inside, the door stays closed by design. This is a protective response, not a malfunction, and it happens automatically. A simple way to visualize this is a light switch. The fat-burning hormone flips the switch on. Insulin flips the switch off. Both cannot be on at the same time. If insulin remains elevated, the light never turns on, so fat stays stored even during dieting. That's why people feel stuck despite effort. The signal is being blocked upstream. This is not speculation or opinion. It's well-documented biological interaction. Researchers have observed this relationship repeatedly. When insulin drops, fat oxidation increases. When insulin rises, fat oxidation decreases. This isn't about motivation or metabolism myths. It's about competing hormonal signals, and insulin is one of the strongest. Most advice ignores this interaction completely. It tells people to focus only on calories, but calories don't control hormonal switches directly. Hormones respond to chemical changes first. That's why two people can eat the same meal and experience completely different outcomes. Their insulin response determines fat storage, not the food alone. This is exactly where most people make the wrong move. They try to force fat loss while insulin stays high. They push harder instead of changing the signal, and the body resists even more. Once you understand this mechanism, the strategy shifts. The goal becomes restoring the signal balance, because when insulin is handled correctly, the switch can turn back on, and that leads directly into how a metabolic reset actually begins. This is where the idea of a metabolic reset comes in. Not a detox, not a crash diet, and not a medical treatment. A reset simply means restoring how your body responds to signals, especially the signals that control insulin and fat storage. Over time, constant spikes overload this system. Sensitivity drops, and insulin has to work harder. That's when fat loss shuts down by default. A reset targets that exact breakdown. Most people assume fixing metabolism requires extreme measures. They think it means eating almost nothing or training non-stop. Others believe only medication can change hormonal responses, but neither approach addresses the root issue. The real problem is cellular responsiveness. When cells stop responding well to insulin, everything backs up. Sugar stays higher for longer, and fat storage becomes the dominant outcome. A reset focuses on improving that response. It helps cells hear insulin's signal again, not louder, but clearer. This reduces the need for high insulin output, and when insulin demand drops, fat burning can resume. This shift happens internally, not through force. That's why it feels different from dieting. It works with the body instead of against it. What makes this approach powerful is how subtle it is. There's no shock to the system, no constant hunger or energy crashes. Instead, appetite starts regulating naturally. Energy feels more stable throughout the day. Cravings lose intensity without conscious effort. These are signs the system is rebalancing, not being suppressed. Researchers describe this as restoring metabolic flexibility, the ability to switch between burning sugar and fat. Healthy bodies do this automatically. Insulin resistance removes that flexibility. A reset gives it back. This is why people feel unstuck when it happens, because the internal brakes are finally released, and fat loss no longer feels forced. The key thing to understand is this: a metabolic reset doesn't start with restriction. It starts with support at the cellular level. Once sensitivity improves, the entire system responds.
This is where real change becomes possible, and it doesn't require extreme behavior. It requires the right biological input, and there is a natural way to activate this reset.
This is where the solution finally comes into focus, not as a miracle and not as a shortcut, but as a science-backed method designed to support your biology, specifically how your body responds to insulin signals. This approach doesn't force fat loss, it removes the internal blocks that prevent it. And that distinction is critical for long-term results because the body must cooperate for change to last. The supplements used in this method are designed with one goal: to support insulin response at the cellular level, not to spike anything and not to suppress appetite unnaturally, but to help restore balance where it was lost. When insulin response improves, blood sugar stabilizes more easily, and when that happens, fat burning can turn back on. This leads to natural fat loss, not forced restriction, and the process feels noticeably different. What makes this method stand out is how it was formulated. Each ingredient is selected based on research and mechanism, not trends, hype, or extreme stimulation. The focus is on metabolic support, not temporary boosts. This creates a foundation for sustainable change, especially for people struggling with insulin resistance. It's built for real-world bodies, not perfect conditions, and that's why it fits so many lifestyles. This solution is not meant for everyone. It's designed for people who feel stuck despite effort, those dealing with stubborn fat, cravings, and energy crashes, people who suspect their metabolism isn't responding properly, and who want a method that works with biology, not against it. There's no need for extreme dieting alongside it, because its role is to support internal regulation. Authority in this approach comes from clarity, not exaggeration. The process is transparent and mechanism-driven. It follows consistent formulation standards and avoids claims that can't be supported logically. Instead, it focuses on restoring insulin sensitivity, which is a well-understood metabolic goal. That's why the results feel logical when they happen, because they follow biological rules. This is only the entry point, not the full picture. Understanding how the solution works builds trust, but seeing how people respond to it builds belief, because real change leaves recognizable signals: less hunger, more stable energy, better control. Those signals show up before the scale changes, and that's what we need to talk about next, because proof doesn't come from theory alone. People usually notice the first changes in very specific ways: more stable energy throughout the day, less constant hunger between meals, fewer sudden cravings for sugar or refined carbs, a feeling of control that wasn't there before, not because willpower suddenly increased, but because the body stopped sending panic signals. That internal calm is often the first proof. Many users describe the same pattern repeating. They eat the same meals as before. They don't suddenly train harder or longer, yet their appetite feels more regulated. Energy doesn't crash mid-afternoon anymore. Late-night snacking becomes easier to resist, and mornings feel less heavy and sluggish. Those are perceived benefits, not medical claims. Logically, this sequence makes sense. When insulin response improves, blood sugar swings soften. When blood sugar stabilizes, hunger hormones calm down. And when hunger decreases, overeating naturally drops. This creates a metabolic environment where fat loss can occur. Not forced, not aggressive, but consistent. That's why the process feels sustainable, because it follows biological cause and effect. Another common signal people report is mental clarity. Less brain fog after meals, more focus without relying on stimulants. This happens when glucose delivery becomes more efficient. Cells get what they need without excess insulin spikes, and the body stops overcompensating. This reinforces trust in the process because the improvements feel systemic,
not isolated. Social proof doesn't come from dramatic transformations alone. It comes from repeated, aligned experiences. Different people noticing similar internal shifts, less hunger, more control, steadier energy. These patterns point to the same mechanism, improved insulin response supporting natural fat loss. That consistency creates a sense of safety and makes the method feel coherent and believable. This is why results often seem faster than expected, not because fat melts overnight, but because the internal resistance is reduced first. Once the block is removed, progress feels more smooth. The body stops fighting every small change, and momentum builds quietly at the start, which raises an important question. What happens when this momentum compounds over time? At this point, the next step is very simple. You don't need to search, guess, or compare endlessly. The supplements that support this method are already available. The direct link is placed for convenience and clarity. You'll find it in the first pinned comment below this video. That's where everything is organized in one place, so you can review it calmly without pressure and decide if it aligns with your goals. This isn't positioned as a shortcut or a promise. It's positioned as support for the process you now understand. Better blood sugar control creates a better internal environment. That environment allows natural fat loss to happen more easily. When resistance drops, progress feels less forced. And that's when rapid weight loss becomes a consequence, not from extremes, but from restored balance, which is exactly what most people are missing. The reason direction matters here is timing. When awareness is fresh, action feels lighter. Waiting too long usually means falling back into noise, conflicting advice, new distractions, and doubt. This method works best when applied consistently, and consistency starts with a clear decision, not emotional pressure, just logical alignment. You either support the process or you don't. There's no requirement to change everything overnight, no demand to overhaul your entire lifestyle. The role of these supplements is supportive, not dominant. They work alongside normal routines. Meals, schedules, and habits don't need to be extreme. That's what makes this approach realistic and why people stick with it longer, because it fits into real life. Availability matters, but so does simplicity. That's why the link is placed directly in the pinned comment. No complicated funnels or hidden steps, just clear access to the tools discussed. You can read, review, and understand at your own pace, without hype or exaggerated urgency, but with the awareness that momentum matters and timing influences results. Once you've seen the details, a bigger picture starts to form. This isn't about one product alone. It's about supporting a metabolic shift over time, small changes stacking into visible results. And that's where commitment becomes important, not just to supplements, but to understanding your body, because the final step isn't information, it's what you choose to do with it next. Now the action step is clear and immediate. Click the first pinned comment now. That's where the supplements supporting this method are listed. No guessing, no searching, no confusion, just a direct path to what we discussed. If insulin handling is the missing piece for you, this is how you begin addressing it properly. Momentum starts with a single, intentional move. If this explanation connected the dots for you, do one simple thing right now. Like this video so more people can see it, because many are struggling with the same hidden issue, and they still think it's about discipline or calories. Your interaction helps this message reach them. It also tells the algorithm this topic matters, and that keeps content like this coming. I also want you to leave a comment below, not just done or an emoji, but where you personally feel stuck right now. Energy, hunger, cravings, or stubborn fat. Writing it out reinforces awareness, and awareness drives better decisions. Plus, I read and respond to these comments, so this becomes a two-way conversation. Make sure you follow the channel as well, because this video is only one layer. The next videos go deeper into the mechanism, how insulin affects fat storage daily, how food timing changes the response, and how small metabolic shifts compound. Each video builds on the last one, so you don't want to miss the sequence. Everything we covered points to one principle. Once insulin is handled, weight loss becomes easier, not effortless, but cooperative. Your body stops fighting every attempt to change. Hunger calms, energy stabilizes, and progress feels more natural. That's the shift most people never experience. The next video expands on this exact idea. What happens after insulin resistance starts reversing? What signals to look for early on? And how to avoid common mistakes that slow results. This is where understanding turns into strategy, and strategy turns into consistency. So take the first step now and stay with me for what comes next.